It's 7 p.m. on Monday, November 20th, 2023, and I call this regular council meeting to order. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and would you please join us for the flag salute, and would Councilmember Whalen please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I see that all council is present tonight, and for staff, we have Police Chief Hernandez, Finance Director Simpson, Public Works Director Madden, and Planning Manager Stallnaker this evening. So our next item up there is citizen participation. The purpose of public comment period at this meeting is for the public to inform the council, not the audience, about their views on matters before the council. It is not intended for debate or discussion with the public, but please state your name and address for the record, and we kindly remind you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. First we have up is, I got the right one here, Susan Johnson.
Thank you. Susan Johnson, 2307 8th Avenue, Milton. Public safety is important to the citizens of Milton, I believe. Public safety should be paramount. Do I get seconds more? Public safety should be paramount in the minds of council before any political aspirations. Traffic safety is part of the overall public safety effort by our police department. Our PD is outstanding in its approach to this effort. The PD officers of Milton are professional and committed to serving the city's public safety policy. Previously, a council member suggested they were not doing the job of enforcing speeding, especially along Fifth. I disagree with this council member. The city has used a motorcycle, and I have seen them along the side roads watching Taylor and Newman. But in today's climate of crime, I would rather have them going after the criminals than sitting on a street corner waiting to issue a ticket when there is a mechanism available to do so. Speed control is essential if Milton is to keep touting it as a walking and bikeable city. We have had individuals killed by speeding vehicles. Also, the council member indicated that red light cameras are not the way to handle the traffic issues. I disagree. I just looked into a few cities and the Municipal Research Service Center. According to MRSC, the following cities use automatic traffic cameras: Bellevue, Federal Way, Issaquah, Lake Forest, Lakewood, Linwood, Moses, Pierce County, Spokane, Tukwila, Wenatchee. In Seattle, they would give a citizen a radar gun. They let you use them. Maybe I could use one on 8th, Chief. Also, the council member reported in his door-to-door survey of 80-some homes, the citizens said no to camera enforcement. Why no? Do these citizens who responded no to traffic calming cameras speed up down Milton Way, Emerald, Yuma, or Taylor? I have been caught by cameras and not happy, but there's always an appeal process, and I didn't have to pay the full amount. I strongly believe as Milton continues to face much pass-through traffic, it is the most logical way to enforce our speed rate on Milton Way and other areas where permissible, especially in school and park areas. Thank you for those on council who support camera enforcement for speeding, and I'd like to turn this in for record.
Thank you, Susan. The next we have is Jackie Strader.
Jackie Strader, 1809 13th. I just wanted to make it clear that the email I sent you is my public comment for tonight, so I'd like it included, and to just remind you that the ends don't always justify the means. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Council, is there any additions or deletions this evening to the agenda? Councilman Strader?
Yeah, I just have one question on page 15, transaction 6474. And my question is, I've never seen an NSF put in the budget before, and I'm just wondering, how did that happen? That we didn't have enough money in the account that caused that?
I used the wrong account to have the checks go out. And so I had to correct that. And 9, unfortunately, vendors, their checks bounced.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other items for the agenda? Okay, move on. The consent agenda, I'll recognize a motion for the consent agenda. Councilman Cedar?
Move to adopt consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Strader to pass the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 7-0. All right, our next item up, we have a presentation this evening by Pierce Transit. They'll be up at the podium. I think we have a packet inside of our, inside in there that we'll refer to. We don't have a projector tonight or anything, so we'll just follow along with the handout that they provided. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Alexandra Mather. I'm the Government Relations Administrator at Pierce Transit, and I'm joined by...
Orion Wheaton, Executive Director of Planning and Community Development at Pierce Transit.
And we know we have 15 minutes, so we are going to go quickly. Okay, so who we are, we like to remind folks that we are your local public transportation agency. Not to be confused with Sound Transit, who is your regional transportation agency. And it is our job to connect people to the places that they need to go with safety and efficiency top of mind. And we are governed by a federated board. Your representative at the moment, there might have just been a board change. We'll get back to you. Okay, so we provide 4 different services. The bus, which is, you know, the big bus you see driving around. Paratransit services, which is the shuttle. Rideshare, which is the formerly known as Vanpool. It is rideshare now, folks. And then microtransit, which is the public version of Lyft and Uber. And our PTBA is 292 square miles. We serve 13 cities and towns. We have 31 bus routes, 877 employees, and currently providing 5.5 million rides annually. Per Washington state law, public transportation benefit areas are allowed to collect sales tax, 0.09, so 9/10 of a penny. And Pierce Transit currently has the taxing authority of 0.6 of a penny. So there is, you know, that 3.3% that should the agency in the future go out to the voters to seek approval for that additional revenue, that's the pad we have. And you'll see later in the presentation that we are significantly underfunded compared to other transit agencies across the state. We also have a really strong partnership with Sound Transit. So Sound Transit contracts with us to provide the commuter buses you see on I-5. They are, it's actually about over 300 jobs here in Pierce County. And they also help us maintain Tacoma Dome Station, which is the largest public transportation hub in the state. And they also in ST3, the ST3 package, they are contributing $60 million to our enhanced capacity corridor, which we'll talk about later. I think it's really important to point out with rider demographics that, you know, 56% of the folks we serve do not have access to a vehicle. So we really are a critical lifeline to helping people carry out the daily duties of their lives. And we work on centering equity in all we do. We use the Pierce County Equity Index to help inform our planning and make those decisions. We also have operator trainings, and we're constantly trying to bring on new technology that makes the system more accessible for all. We also received funding from the legislature last session to establish a behavioral health program, which would be a behavioral health specialist partnered with a public safety officer, and so that we can go respond to folks who are having a crisis out on the system, which then allows law enforcement to go carry out the duties that they're actually supposed to be doing rather than, responding to behavioral health crisis. Serving our community, of course, is our priority. We have many different partnerships. The CTAG is it's a citizen advisory group that the board looks to for recommendation and approval. We are currently entering into an IGSA, which is an intergovernmental service agreement with JBLM. JBLM and Pierce Transit have a lot in common, and we have a lot, especially in the topics of like electrification. They have a lot of land. We need more land for CDL training. They also have a big transit need, and with this rideshare program that we're going to share with you, we have the ability, we're in discussions about opening that up for the service men and women and their families on base. We also have a Good to Go social corporate responsibility program where employees from Pierce Transit volunteer at different organizations across Pierce County. And then we received our first federal grant to work on electrification back in 2016. And so we've already gone through a lot of the growing pains of what it means to electrify your fleet. And we have 9 electric buses out on the system now. Our goal is to be 100% zero emission by 2042. Of course, that is a big goal and dependent on funding. But if you need any support and knowledge on electrification for your public fleets, like, we are happy to share our story and our experience with you and count us a partner. Okay, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Ryan to talk to some of our major initiatives.
Some of the things that we're working on currently that I think folks don't always see because they typically just see the 40-foot bus. A big one for us is a base modification. We have a base that's been around for really unchanged for about 36 years. We, as you may know, we operate 60-foot articulated buses for Sound Transit up at, back and forth to Seattle. We've also been in conversations with them over the years about running double-deckers to and from Seattle. We just don't have the capacity to do that. So we've taken a look at what it would take for us internally to add some capacity for us to take a look at different vehicles. We also are on the verge of having no space for our vehicles. So we're also looking at how we can modify not just the facilities that maintain those vehicles, but also the facilities that we use to store those vehicles. A big thing that we are involved in right now, and we've really spent the last 9 months working on, is our bus system recovery plan. We had to draw down service to about 80% at the beginning of COVID, and because of operator shortages and as of late, maintenance staff shortages, we just haven't been able to get back above that 80% mark. We know that it's coming at some point. We also know that when it comes, we're likely not going to put service exactly like it was at the beginning of 2020. So we've spent about 9 months in the community talking with folks from around Pierce County in our service area to see what do things look like, because we know traffic patterns and work commute has obviously changed a lot since 2019, 2020. And we're excited that our board took a look at it at last week's meeting in December. They're going to come back, have another public conversation, hopefully vote for this. The unfortunate thing is we can't tell people what the timeline is. We're cutting things up into phases for how we bring back different types of service and where they'll come back, but it's really dependent on staff levels. So we're excited to have the conversation again in December. We invite everybody to come take part of that or send your comments on the plans that have been put forward. And then one other thing that we'll talk about in a second is our high capacity transit. On the slide that talks about high capacity transit enhanced bus, this is really us making a shift from our bus rapid transit project that we had worked on for the better part of half a decade. And about 3 months ago, we made the very tough decision to transition from what had become a very overrun cost project into something that was manageable from a cost perspective, but also allows us the flexibility in the future to go back to bus rapid transit. Enhanced bus, I wouldn't say is a downgrade, but it's certainly a first step toward a fully functioning bus rapid transit project. What enhanced bus will look like, if you look at the map that you have in front of you, we're going to start in Spanaway at our soon-to-be open Spanaway Transit Center. Running north to south, you can get from Spanaway Transit Center to the Tacoma Dome station in round trip. So if you're commuting to and from, You can get there in 22 minutes less than it would take you today on the Route 1. But the good news for that community, and that's about 12 miles that you'll see we're running down SR7, is that we're leaving Route 1 in place. So Route 1 makes a lot of stops throughout that corridor. This makes limited stops. It's making 14 stops at major intersections that connect not just with parking facilities and major amenities, but also other routes. And the thing moves pretty quickly. It's unfortunately, one of our only routes locally that gets up to the speed limit, which we like to tell people is a big deal in transit talk. And we've been out testing it for the last few months, and we actually think that people are going to not just be able to see what enhanced bus can do, but as we go forward with some further improvements over the next 3 years, we're hoping that people actually start to look at this as the first step, as I mentioned, to getting to bus rapid transit. And what that looks like is a little more closer to stations that you'd see for light rails. Improvements that you'd see at those stations would include ticket vending machines so that you don't have to worry about getting a ticket on board. You can come and go quickly because you'd see level boarding so that strollers, wheelchairs, any mobility devices would be able to get on and off those vehicles quickly. But we're not done with bus rapid transit. We just realized that we had to take a step back and redesign it. We're also looking at enhanced bus and bus rapid transit in other corridors. So for us, it's routes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 402 in Puyallup. And you see a map in front of you. We're going to finish up work on what the next corridor is that we're looking at, and we're expecting that to be either routes 2 or 3. We're also excited that tomorrow we're having a kickoff event for our our Puyallup Runner project. We have implemented microtransit or on-demand transit in a few locations that have never really had any transit options. The map you see in front of you includes those. We have Spanaway, Parkland, Midland. We also have one down the Tide Flats and one along Ruston Way, where we currently don't have local bus service. What we're kicking off tomorrow in Puyallup is actually an on-demand service that overlays a chunk of the city that already has a bus. And we're testing this out to see if this is flexible enough for a community that has fairly low ridership in this one area. Is this something that we could potentially employ in areas that we see low ridership or need better coverage? And what this looks like is you have your phone, and similar to Lyft or Uber, you hail a ride, it tells you how long it's going to take to get there, and then you tell it the destination within that zone. You can also call and request a ride, and we can send something out. We have accessible vans that will be out picking folks up. At 1:30 tomorrow, if you happen to be around downtown Puyallup, we'll be kicking this project off. We also employ people. You don't have to be a resident of Puyallup to ride it. We're asking people to come out and test it. Let us know what you think. We're looking at a different vendor, which is likely going to have some influence in what we do in the other areas. And for us, this is part of our recovery plan. It is, can we provide a more localized and flexible transit option that looks different than a 40-foot bus? Because when we put in a 40-foot bus, as you know from some of the projects we've done, it's there for a year and we can't really do much to it. This allows us more flexibility and hopefully allows us to build ridership in areas where we haven't seen much transit in the past. A couple other things that we're working on. A big deal, I think, for local communities is our system-wide bus shelter replacement. As you may have noticed, we have an issue with vandalism in our bus shelters. When we went out and counted earlier this year, we had 60% of all of our shelters that had some form of missing glass, either a pane or all the glass was gone. So we've been out replacing glass, but I think more importantly, we have changed what we're going to implement. So we have 40 new shelters going out early next year, and we're hoping that this new shelter will actually give us a little more coverage when it comes to reducing vandalism. We're also putting solar-powered lights at those stations to provide some security benefits, and we're excited to roll those out, like I said, at the beginning of next year. We're also, I mentioned briefly that we have a transit center opening. This is our first transit center that we've opened in nearly 20 years. It's opening down in Spanaway, just past Walmart. We're going to open initially with 20 parking spots, and then our second phase will actually add 200 parking spots to make it a full-blown park and ride, and that should open up, that first phase should open up in about 3 or 4 months. Last thing I want to mention, Alex mentioned what funding looks like for Pierce Transit, and we like to remind folks, particularly cities like Milton, where I'm going to guess a smaller city has a smaller staff, but is still expected to do everything that a big city does. We look at ourselves very similarly, that everybody at Pierce Transit, from the executive director to the CEO who's at a meeting like this right now, gets out and works every day. And we like to remind folks that Pierce Transit really gets, I think, a really good bang for your buck. Alex mentioned that we're at 0.6% sales tax. Some of the other agencies around us are not at 0.6. Intercity Transit has less than half the population that we do in terms of its service area. They have almost the same budget as we do. They're at 1.2% sales tax. Sound Transit's at 1.4. Kitsap Transit's at 1.1. Community Transit in Everett's at 1.2. Even Spokane is at 0.8%. And so we're not out asking for money, but we are out reminding folks that when you look at agencies that are really providing good service at what we consider to be a really good deal, that Pierce Transit hopefully is at the top of your list when you think about that. With that, I think we just made our limit. So if there are any questions or if you want us to come back at any point to talk to your groups and work on projects, we're happy to take those down.
Councilmember Cedar?
Hey, yeah, thank you so much for being in here. Love everything Pierce Transit does. I just have a couple questions. First, about the runner. I see that it's point to point. So if you're in one of those zones, like if you're in the Ruston zone and you get in that runner, where is the limit of the service?
It's within that zone, but the hope is that people are going to go to transit centers, because once they get to a transit center, then they have flexibility to use the regular system. But point to point within those, if you go on the app, it'll show you exactly where you can go.
So does that utilize operators that would have otherwise been operating a bus? Is that, I recognize operator shortage is a
Not
huge deal.
yet. So the long-term goal is for us to operate it in-house, and we haven't had the staff to do that. So currently, we have a contractor that does the technology and the operations, but the long-term goal is for us to employ Pierce Transit staff to drive those vehicles.
And then you mentioned bus shelter replacements. I can speak for this city that our bus shelters are pretty poor. Is there something the city can do to get involved in that process, recognizing that it is a financial undertaking for Pierce Transit?
Short of chipping in for these bus shelters, which are ridiculously expensive, I should add. What we've done is we've used the city and county's equity index and tried to make sure that we're spreading these shelters out. So what we can do is I'll make sure we send over a list of the first 40 to make sure that if we've identified something in Milton, that you take a look at that. I think right now it's really making sure that when we call and we're doing any sort of planning or putting in a concrete pad, that your folks know why we're doing it, and that the quicker we can get those through and we can meet regulations. And I think that's probably the easiest way. And then, like I said, we'll send over where we're looking. And if there's a spot that you think might work better for the city, then we're certainly welcome to have that conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll just note here, it was Mayor Kim Roscoe. Now it's Doug Fagundes, who I haven't had the privilege of working with yet as our commissioner for here. What I will say is that, Milton is not generally high on the equity index. And unfortunately, that means that our transit service is pretty lackluster. And so I think anything the city can do to help to get people involved in transit is beneficial. So we're very interested, at least I can speak for myself. I'm very interested. Thank you.
I also just wanted to flag, as, smaller cities are looking at grant opportunities, like we're always available to help you with, if there's a strong, bike ped access to transit nexus with sidewalks or infrastructure like that, like feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to provide some technical support for you all, including letters of support.
Councilman Whalen?
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation, and welcome again back to City of Milton. How has our ridership changed over the last, I don't know if you have those numbers and so forth. Is it increasing? Are we participating enough in Pierce Transit? And again, in concert with what was just mentioned, how can we help, or what would you suggest we do to improve that ridership and the viability of Pierce Transit?
Right now, the best thing you can do is remind people to call 253-581-8000 to ask about getting a job as a bus driver. So the biggest thing for us right now is really just finding people to drive the routes. And I think Milton is a place to really consider what transfers look like. So getting from point A to point B is usually pretty simple. And our problem is how frequently the bus comes through. But anybody that wants to transfer from one bus to another, right now, it looks like a small thing because we're only down 20% of our service. But the issue becomes those transfer points. Instead of waiting 2 or 3 minutes to make a transfer to another bus, you're sometimes waiting 20 or 30 minutes now. And that really eliminates a lot of people from being able to ride the bus. So currently it is, if you know anybody that is interested in working on a vehicle or operating a vehicle, we would love to talk to those people. I think long-term though, It's our planning department working with your planning department, making sure that transit's tied in with the work that you're doing, and making sure that our folks understand better how we can fit transit into your long-range plan. So for me, that's the big thing. I don't know what Alex looks at from a GR perspective.
No, I mean, that's exactly right.
In ridership-wise, I don't know specifically how Milton's done the last 3 years, really since we've been looking really intently at ridership. I can tell you system-wide, we've been about 60 to 65% since COVID started. You'll hear a lot of stories, read a lot of stories about what big city transit looks like during COVID. And we know because we operate Sound Transit service, commuter service is really struggling. But for the people that ride Pierce Transit, they typically ride it because they don't have a car, they don't have an ID, they need to go to work, a medical appointment, school. And those folks, they were out riding transit when nobody else would get on transit. So our folks ride it because they have to. Our demographics look a lot different than larger cities. And we recognize that for a lot of folks, it's not an essential service. It's really a lifeline service for them. So we haven't had as much of a hit, but we do recognize that until we get the service levels up, we're still going to be depressed.
And I'll just add a little comment. I know a lot of folks that work for Pierce Transit. I'm with several different motorcycle groups, and there's a lot of folks that work Pierce County that Pierce Transit have. They love you. You know, knowing part of the employee base and so forth, they're very fortunate. They feel very comfortable with it, and they're very happy to work with it. And it's uplifting when you talk to folks that work for somebody like yourselves and so forth, and how they enjoy their lives. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Whitaker?
Thank you. So you had mentioned being able to use the phone to be able to schedule a runner, correct? So what other technological innovations are there that you're kind of looking at to be able to implement to speed up service, to improve service? Go.
So I think the big one for us, so we have a partnership with Transit App, and we are very close to having everything on Transit App. So currently, you can plan a trip on the app, and you can actually buy a ticket. So that for us, it seems like an insignificant thing, but if you have an ORCA card, you still can't use a phone with the ORCA account. So for us, that was a big thing last year. We're going to incorporate our runner system. Our new vendor can actually incorporate with Transit App. And we would like to see something like that for our shuttle passengers as well, because it's difficult for them to sometimes pay for service because it's a little bit different. We're looking at that. We're also looking internally at how we're doing our schedules. So that's a big thing that folks don't see what we're doing, but we're actually providing quite a different look at how schedules operate and trying to not just trim off some time, but free up some vehicles so that we can lessen the load for maintenance operators. And then I think that people will start to see us incorporating things a little bit differently on the website. Right now, we use the website just like a large file with everything that's there. And internally, we've had discussions the last couple of years about making it more interactive so that when people need to give us feedback, when we're looking for components of new projects we're working on, that people can actually give us that feedback directly and quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time.
Our next item is number 7, our public hearing. The next item before the council is the 2024 Budget Ordinance 2079-23. I will turn the floor over to Finance Director Simpson for a brief overview.
Thank you. The 2024 preliminary budget document was provided to the City Council and available to the public on October 9th, 2023, and discussion was held at the study session on October 9th, 2023, and at the study session on November 13th, 2023. The public hearing is scheduled to take public testimony regarding the 2024 preliminary budget. This is an opportunity for citizens to express their suggestions and opinions. A second public hearing is scheduled for December 4th, 2023, and adoption of the 2024 budget may follow that public hearing. And lastly, the 2024 budget must be adopted prior to December 31st, 2023.
Okay, well, I will now open the public hearing at 7:30 PM to take public comment on the 2024 budget ordinance 2079-23. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we have Jackie Strader.
Jackie Strader, 1809 13th. The only thing I'm commenting on is the new staffing positions. And the only thing I'm asking is that if we're going to create them, to be committed to them maybe, because that might be a problem why we may be having trouble filling positions at times. Because like in 2019, we hired a superintendent project manager, then it was removed in 2021, and now in 2023, we're hiring one again on a temporary basis. And in 2021, we had a half-time deputy clerk. Then we were told it was always the intent to expand it into a community coordinator position. And now we're back again asking for a deputy clerk. So it just seems like maybe there could be a coordinated plan for staffing and without a lot of the boomerang. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Hearing no other comments for the hearing, we'll close the hearing at 7:33. Our next item is we'll have our first read of ordinance 2079-23 for the 2024 budget. It's on page 41 of your packet. Finance Director Simpson will again provide a review of this agenda bill. Following her review, I will need open the floor for discussion.
Thank you. The 2024 preliminary budget document was provided to the City Council and available to the public on October 9th, 2023, and discussion was held at the study session on October 9th, 2023, and at the study session on November 13th, 2023. The required public hearings will be held on November 20th, 2023, preliminary, and December 4th, 2023, final. The 2024 budget must be adopted prior to December 31st, 2023. And no changes have been made to the 2023 preliminary budget document as presented November 13th, 2023.
All right, we'll open the floor for discussion. Any questions? Councilman Whalen?
Not quite a discussion, but a comment. Usually we have a lot more discussion about budgets and so forth, but seeing how it's become a little bit more easy, palatable, and precise, I appreciate the documentation I read. And that's all.
Okay. Yeah, I think the process, what I've witnessed over the last years has gotten so laid out that when we discuss it and we go through and look at it, it's helped out. I know staffing is always a discussion point every year as we go through, and it's something that we always want to look at and be cognizant of and address appropriately. But I appreciate the process too that's kind of streamlined and helped us through that quite a bit. Anyone else? Okay, so that's a discussion item. It will be coming back for us here in another week or so. Yeah, it'll be on December 4th. So now we'll go on to 8B, I believe, which is Finance Director Simmons will provide a review of this agenda bill also. Following a review, I'll need a motion to open the floor for discussion since it is that item. Go ahead.
Thank you. The city must adopt and submit the tax levy ordinance by November 30th of each year. The attached ordinance pertains to the increase in the regular levy only, exclusive of additional revenue from new construction. Amounts for this ordinance are provided by Pierce County and are calculated as follows. What you see before you, step 1, is to calculate the 2024 amount. And then the step 2 shows the change from the 2023 amount. Additional revenue related to the annexations and new construction is included in the preliminary budget and will be included in the levy certification as required.
Need a motion for discussion? Councilman Cedar?
I move to adopt the attached ordinance 2077-23, establishing the regular tax levy for properties located in Pierce and King counties for the year 2024.
Second.
It has been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Whalen to move to adopt the attached ordinance 2077-23, establish the regular tax levy for properties located in Pierce and King counties for the year 2024. Councilmember Cedar, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks. I've spoken a lot in support of kind of a disciplined approach, and I believe that this falls into line with that, increasing in a predictable way every year so that we don't have to play catch up after a long time. So I support passing this.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you. I appreciate the precise documentation we received. I think the discussions we've had prior up to this have been fully explored, explained, and understood by the council. And I appreciate the smooth traveling we're doing with the budget. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember White?
Thank you very much for a microphone. I thought maybe you were giving me a message that I've been talking too much lately. I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I really think we should consider it because I think we should be banking this 1% increase. I'm looking at the budget document. We had an ending balance of $4,180,812 at the end of 2022. Our projected fund balance for this year is $4,367,534. That's an almost $200,000 increase from a year prior. This particular assessment for a 1% is only $15,274.82. We don't need it, and we shouldn't assess it against our citizens when we don't need it. So I just want to bring that up to the body. I think it should be considered. It doesn't go away if we don't assess it this year. If we need it next year, we can take 2%. But I think we owe it to our citizenry to give them a break when we have such a large fund balance and we don't need the money.
Anyone else? I would just like to add in that I have looked at this and looking at our budget coming in at 4 point something million this starting year, and actually we're reducing our fund balance during the 2024 year through our projections by about 500,000 or so. This $15,000 to me is a drop in the bucket compared to when you spread it over all the households in the whole city and everything. And so at this point, I am for this as it comes to motion, but I appreciate your comments on that. Anyone else? Councilman
More of
Strader?
a question. Councilmember White said that we could increase it 2% the following year, but I thought the legislator reduced that or restricted to just 1% a year.
Yeah, it's, and I don't know the exact legislation on that. My feeling on is that I'd hate to go to the public and say, yeah, we're gonna do 0, but next year we're gonna do 2.
Yeah.
It's much better when you're looking at a small amount, very small amount, that you make it an easy process over the years. That's just my opinion on it. But, Anybody else? Okay, this has been a motion.
I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a
ahead.
point of order. I just am unclear. When you're acting as Mayor Pro Tem, do you vote as a council member as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It has been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Whalen To move to adopt the attached ordinance 2077-23, establish the regular tax levy for properties located in Pierce and King counties for the year 2024. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Passed 6-1. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is 8C on page 61. And Chief Fernandez will provide a review of this agenda bill. Following his review, I will need a motion to open the floor for discussion.
I'll actually be presenting on this
Oh,
tonight.
okay, so Public Works Director Madden will present on this item.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. The item before you tonight is an action item. It was first presented on October 2nd during the regular meeting and is in front of council for potential approval tonight. Staff recommended action is to move to authorize mayor to execute the service agreement with Nova Global Inc. for traffic infraction detection and enforcement. As part of the Milton Automated Photo Enforcement Program, the city advertised for photo enforcement services in July. The actual date of advertisement was July 3rd, and it closed on the 31st. So it was open for 4 full weeks for those who were interested in responding to the RFP. We received 2 responses, Nova Global Inc. and Ultimate Inc. After we reviewed, we put together a panel. Chief Ken Fauché, who is the Public Works Admin Assistant, was also on the panel, as was I. And the 3 of us reviewed the RFP submittals based on the criteria. The scoring was based on technical requirement, capability and experience, user experience, and price of service. All 3 of us unanimously chose Nova Global Inc. The other firm, while they have a solid track record on the East Coast, they are not serving any cities west of the Mississippi River, essentially. And so they didn't have anyone out here that they had consulted with. Their pricing was also higher, and they did not provide references in the area that we could, compare apples to apples. Other states have different requirements they need to meet. So the item in front of you tonight is for Nova Global to execute an agreement with them for photo enforcement program. And yes, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have. I know that there was some concern about the timeline that the RFP was open, and also just transparency, and also some of the language that was put in the RFP. And the language that was put forth was aggressive. We wanted to get those cameras in before school started and before December 1st for the non-school related cameras. There was just a lot of coordination that needed to go into this for placement, for references, and the city has now conducted all of that background research, and we feel like we're in a place to execute the contract with Nova Global.
Okay, I'll need a motion. Councilman Whalen?
Thank you. Move to authorize the mayor to execute the service agreement with Novia, I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure, Global Inc. for traffic infraction detection and enforcement.
It has been moved by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Cedar to move to authorize the mayor to execute the services agreement with Nova Global Incorporated for traffic infraction detection and enforcement. Councilmember Whalen, would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, I appreciate that and thank you. As far as my concern is that it's a little bit late, but it's appropriate. The intersections that we're talking about are quite complicated. The intersections we're talking about, especially on 28th, line of sight distances has been, well, not strictly enforced by the city of Milton, and it makes it difficult for traffic to see up Milton Way. That being said, that being in our history, the fact is that the one particular intersection is run significantly. It's not the only one. It happens on 19th. It happens on 23rd, more than people realize. You have people that will pass the stop bars and run right up to the intersection across the pedestrian walkway and stop. That's a hazard to the pedestrians also. It's becoming more of a common event within the city of Milton than a minimized event. And if this is the process we have to take to minimize these types of events for the health, welfare, and safety of the general public, so be it. And it is a cost-effective way and not a overburden. To do what we're doing here would take probably 3 or 4 officers in their entirety. We're talking about $400,000 for supporting another 4 officers approximately with equipment and so forth. And they could only work on one event at a time. So the events behind or preceding the event that they capture is as significant as the one they could capture. This is use of good technology, good resources, and safety for the general public of the city of Milton. Anybody who doesn't recognize that is out of time with the situations. There are cities even adjacent to us that are considering removing right-hand turns at red lights completely because it's gotten so out of control and difficult. It's helped quite a bit with the video surveillance to minimize those, but it's still a significant problem for a lot of cities. Even Seattle's considering no right-hand turns at red lights, period, because of the issues it sustains, and other cities around us. So I think we're taking a bold move for the future, but I think the general public, especially the pedestrian public, will benefit from this greatly. So I appreciate the time we spent on it, and I would like to be the first to welcome, if the council does so permit, the changes for the city of Milton.
Thank you. Councilmember Cedar, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Whalen said. I think that intersection at 28th in particular is particularly problematic. During this last week, I've thought about this a lot, and I've sat up there and watched that intersection a bit. It is astonishing to see the amount of red light running that occurs in that right turn. I don't think that's all about the red light, but as the chief has said, I think this is a tool that the police want, and it's one tool in the tool belt. So I am generally in support of this, and as we've talked about, I certainly support speed enforcement, as I think is pretty clear for everybody. My concern in this agreement is predominantly with the termination clauses. And so I need to know that the city can leave this contract without getting sued by Nova Global. And it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to write it within the 4 corners of the document. And so I'm actually interested in Director Madden's take on this. If you have any insight into this, if not, that's fine. But in particular, the only way I can see us being able to terminate this as the customer is if we can, and this is paragraph 5.4 in the agreement on page 67 of our packets. It says if we can conclude that there is liability arising out of the system, either actual or potential. That seems to be the only way. So if council, next year decides like, hey, we don't think this is working for us, I don't see a way we can cancel this contract or tell the mayor we don't want it anymore. And that's troubling to me. Other concerns that I've had, I'm willing to fall by the wayside here, but I need some assurance on that. Director Madden, I don't know if you've had that talk with Nova Global. If not, then I suppose we can hear from Nova Global on their position.
Yes, excellent question. And you are absolutely correct. 5.4 of the agreement is the clause, and I would just like to read it for the record. The customer may terminate the agreement on 30 days of advance written notice if the customer concludes in its reasonable discretion that potential or actual liability of the customer to third parties arising out of or in connection with the system makes the program impractical, uneconomical, legally contested or impossible to continue, and/or if the system cannot be installed. Violations of the customer's ethic code would constitute cause for termination of this agreement. So I agree with you that that is the only area where the city could potentially lean on to terminate the contract if we feel it's not reasonable or practical. That is where I would go to look. I do feel like that there is leeway within that statement because it does say reasonable discretion that the potential or the actual liability makes the program infeasible. But I would, Nova Global, do you have anything else to add to that?
Laws change and the sentiment of the community and councils change over time. And when ordinances change in our past so that they do not wish to have the photo enforcement program any longer, we remove it. And we have never in the history of the company, and you'll just have to take it for what it is, sued a city for not continuing a contract that's enforced.
I appreciate that. I am a lawyer and don't trust that. That's what I will say.
Yeah.
So
I would just say, add one more thing. The part of the only part that's really of concern is the upfront investment that is committed from the company from construction point of view is considerable. And so there must be some protection in that initial investment so that in 3 months you don't decide we're out, we don't want to do it anymore, where we have put in millions of dollars in infrastructure and costs. So we would want to have that language at least be somewhat understanding and sympathetic to those investments. I think that's the reason,
And the only other thing that I would add to that is that the legal department for the city of Milton did review this contract, and while it might not give us all the assurances that we would want, they felt comfortable with the termination clause.
do you feel comfortable with it, Director Madden?
I do, because of the flexibility of reasonable discretion, given that it has the potential or the actual liability. But I am not an attorney.
And I'm not wearing that hat, so thank you.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Whitaker?
Thank you. I know the chief has mentioned in the past about this is a pass-through city by all the communities around us. And I would venture to say that a lot of the issues that we're encountering, like that Councilmember Cedar is stating, are probably, a lot of those people are just passing through. And they use those, 28th to, I don't want to go on Meridian. And so I'm all for the cameras to help slow that down. I'm also big on, Councilmember Whalen brought up at our last meeting about the big issue is people just not stopping on the stop bar. Thank you for saying that, because now you've planted that seed in my head, which is a good thing. Because now I'm much more cognizant now of stopping at the stop bar and then rolling up. And it kills me. So it's got me to watch other people, and they don't stop at the stop bar, they stop in the crosswalk. And that's definitely a safety issue. So in the safety aspect of having the cameras, I'm for them to help curtail some of these, traffic issues that we do have.
Councilmember White?
Thank you. I also have grave reservations about section 5.4 because it clearly states that there has to be potential or actual liability of the customer to a third party. So yes, they could sue us. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read. So we are going to be locked in for a minimum period of 5 years. we're going to be on the hook for $2,159,460 at a minimum, assuming that the revenue that comes in meets the monthly cost. According to the contract, 6.5, if there is a balance owing at the end of the contract, it's forfeited, so we wouldn't have to come out of pocket, but we will have to have the system for 5 years. I do have a question about section 4.1. At the bottom, it says the installation date shall be the latest date that a system becomes installed and operational. According to Exhibit A, there can be up to 20 additional systems added over time. And with that language, the way at least that I read it, that if one more system is installed, being that it will be the latest one entered, the 5 years would start over again. So the 5 year starts after the last camera is installed. And I think that that should be changed to the earliest date, not the latest date. 5.1 does say that we can get out with mutual agreement. So if the company does agree to let us out if we want out, that could happen. But I would say the chances of that are slim.
Councilman
That's
Schrader?
the-
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Those are the comments that I had about the contract itself, but if you wouldn't mind, when you were here the last meeting, you talked about essentially the measure of success, and that you'd be able to compare, I assume, accident data from the intersections that would become protected so that we could see that actually something measurable was happening. Would that be accident data that you would be using?
No, we don't
for that
collect the
metric?
accident data. We collect the violation data. So we would tell you how many, based on the original study for the baseline, how many since the system's installation there have been of that violation type.
Okay.
We don't collect accident data, but your police department can get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Schrader?
Well, I've got a number of questions, and we'll going back to 4.2, the language says, terms of this agreement shall be automatically extended for 2 additional terms of a 5-year contract. So that's 15 years that we're looking at. I'm wondering why automatically is extended, because I know in other contracts that NG has set up, it is the customer shall have the option in the language. So I'm curious as to why automatically was stuck in there.
Our other contracts do state an automatic renewal unless the customer wishes to not participate in the program any longer. And then that would end that term, and we would no longer be in contract.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just also disappointed with the lack of information that council has been given on this. You talked about having the data for us, so what each one of those intersections, what kind of production or product we were going to get out of that. What are the numbers for that? What's the increase on staffing for the court and the police? What does a sales tax mean? Because we're going to be paying a sales tax for the service, correct?
It comes out of the revenue generated from the violations.
Okay. So all of these things, and I think somebody else, one of the other council members said that we could be looking at additional $450,000 in additional admin fees. I mean, this kind of thing is, I'm surprised that we don't have that information in front of us. Where are the hard numbers, a spreadsheet showing your revenue in, your revenue out. What are the hard costs of this thing? I haven't seen any of that. So that is one of my other concerns. And then also the language on this contract also talks about what is a monthly photo enforcement fee? What is that?
What section, Councilman?
Section 6.5, page 69.
Oh, that's the fee for the camera system per month.
Okay. All right.
So Councilmember, that's based on the pricing that was provided as part of the contract for each standalone unit.
Okay.
So 28th, for example, there would be 3 standalone units at that intersection.
And so each month we'll be getting, so say it's $5,300, and that's, we're looking at like $5,300 or $530,000 a month for each one of those cameras, basically?
Approximately 4,000.
4,000, okay. So, yeah. And then there's the contract at the very end, I believe, it's on, let's see, where it used the term city manager. We don't have a city manager. So, and at this point, do the cameras support themselves? We don't see those numbers. I think you said they would, but I don't believe we have seen any of those numbers. That's one of the concerns I have with this.
Understood. Yes, when we first met during the council retreat, we looked at the baseline projections. And council was provided that information, and it talked about how much each unit would cost. And then if the city wanted to move forward with stop line enforcement and red light enforcement, there were some projections on there about revenue. And all of those projections, even with different scenarios of whether the stop bar is included or whether it's not included, fully paid for the installation of the units, the monthly fee of the units, and for the additional cost to the city to facilitate this program with an additional PD staff position and all the court costs. So every projection that we ran, all costs were paid for by the revenue of the system.
Okay, all right. Well, I have to be in concurrence with Councilmember Cedar that based on the language itself on the exit clause, that I can't support this with that language. I think we need to clean up the language in this contract, but I also want to say that Mrs. Strader brought forward her concerns about the process itself, and I think that's in question as to the way that was conducted. So I would just say, having all that on the plate, I think that I can't support this. Not that I'm against cameras. I think they're a great tool and can be used, but I'm also was thinking that we should, I thought we talked about at the retreat of putting in a couple cameras and seeing how that worked, and make an evaluation after that, take it and say, okay, yeah, they're working, and then we can expand from there. But now we're up to 9 cameras, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
6 red light, 2 school zone, and 1 park.
Yeah.
So
I had one other question
Yes.
on the one of the camera sites that concerned me was the one that going downhill, but we didn't have one going uphill. I see that as being a problem because you're going to have an attorney argue, well, what do you got one going downhill and not going uphill? It's not next to the park. It's actually on the other side. There's no crosswalks, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I can foresee a legal problem there.
Well, there is a crosswalk at 15th and Milton Way. And this camera location, as we've discussed it, would approximately be parallel with the sport court. And so it is near a crosswalk. I just want to make sure I'm tracking on the question.
I hear that, but why wouldn't you have one on the, also on the uphill side?
It was based on the assessment.
Yeah,
Significant speeding downhill, not as big of an issue going up.
yeah. My concern would be that court could determine that a speed trap because you don't have it on both sides.
You have signage.
Huh?
You're warned ahead of time with signage
Yeah,
and flashing beacons in the case of school zone, so it's not hidden.
okay.
I mean, there's large, metal signs that will be out before every different type of system that we put out.
I hear, yeah, I fully understand that, but I just see that it possibly being an argument for an attorney. So, yeah, I would say to take care of that. You're saying that the numbers don't show going up, enough people going uphill would be speeding to justify the camera?
We felt one camera would
Deter,
create the impact that we're looking for to slow traffic down
okay.
in this area. And then I just wanted to just speak on two things. One, the RFP, just for the council's understanding, that RFP was not based on Fife, Washington. There's actually several municipalities that we looked at, but it was not based on Fife. And so just that's the feedback there. And then we did have it open for that full 4 weeks where we were soliciting for responses for the RFP. So we felt like we conducted the requirements of the RFP. Did you have any other questions or concerns?
Well, addressing that issue, it was only open for a month. So
Correct.
I'm not sure if that would have, how many other companies would have been able to, one, get their own data, research it, it just seemed like too short of a window for that to be fair to others. And it may have limited and said, nah, I can't, there's no way we can put that together in time to put the offer in. So I think it kind of limited us as to who we could get.
Understood. Most RFPs are open for 2 to 3 weeks, and so we did add a week on there. The fact is, there's not a lot of vendors out there that facilitate this type of service, and so it is a small pool.
One last question. Sure. Why didn't we go with the service that Puyallup is using? Because I'm seeing they use the same system with their court. So now they're going to be using a different system with our court?
They did not respond.
Has that been addressed? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Cedar?
I think I just have a point of order here. And this is about what we are actually authorizing with this motion. Are we binding the mayor or the executive to utilize this contract as written? Or does the mayor retain flexibility to engage in further negotiations, for instance, regarding paragraph 5.4?
I believe in the motion, it's established by the contract itself as it's presented. And the motion then would have to carry a subset to that motion or a caveat to that motion made by the council if we wanted to change 5.4 or another section. But we are looking at the contract as it is. I would doubt that a motion could carry, I mean, we would have to put it into motion that we'd want to change 5.4 to demonstrate that it would be for any reason or whatever, but I'm sure that would have to be a negotiation then back with Nova Globe as we go back and forth.
Yeah, and so if I may.
Mhm.
So outside of that point of order, I mean, Director Matt, I know we've been belaboring this point a lot. I guess I'm curious, is this a concern to you, our ability to exit this contract before 5 years, if for some reason something changes? Because I think several council members are concerned about that. I want to support this. I want to vote yes, right? I'm very much in support of automated enforcement, but that gives me pause if it's going to create a problem for the city. And so I guess I'm looking for some assurance from you if you've had discussions with the mayor about this in particular, or about what our future looks like if we pass this.
Yes, I have talked to the mayor about this and also with legal counsel with Andrew. And they did not raise a substantial concern about our ability to get out of this contract. We felt that 5.4 protected us, and also 5.1 terminated by mutual written consent of both parties. When we actually go out and start looking at installation, if it becomes prohibitive for Nova Global, they've got the right to exit, and so does the city. So I do not have concern based on 5.4, just because I've said it before, but the potential or the actual liability to the customer, and I'm resting on the word potential.
So if I may then, just to kind of summarize my thoughts on this, I really appreciate Nova Global's ability to be here on multiple nights. And what I'm hearing is that 5.1 provides us a way with two reasonable parties where people's costs are protected to get out of that. And that's Nova Global is representing tonight, that they'd be willing to do that if it's economically feasible for everybody. I'm also hearing, and I believe Milton's understanding, if we pass this contract, our position and understanding of the language there is that there's enough flexibility in that clause that we can exit this without incurring a lawsuit to mandate enforcement for 5 years. Would you agree that that's a correct phrasing of our understanding here tonight?
That is my understanding. Agreed.
Thank you, Director Madden.
Anyone else? Councilmember Cedar, or White, excuse me.
I just want to come back to that section, 5.4. I agree that our legal department, having looked at this and saying, yeah, that's fine legal language. And so I guess I will ask Director Madden. You've said several times that the word potential in that sentence gives you comfort. But also part of that sentence is third parties. So who is this third party that you're going to go to attach potential liability to in order to get out of this contract should we wish to? Because that is a key clause of that sentence. There has to be a third party that is going to cause the city potential or actual liability. So who is that?
Like you contract your services with the Puyallup courts, so that would be a third party. They would have an interest that would be continued. We would continue to service those violations until the end, the adjudication process. So that's a third party. And the other thing to note is that all expenses come from the violation funds. There are no funds come at any time from any other source for anything. The court services, the officer's time. And if this contract should end at any point, whether on term or prior to term end, and the city of Milton had a shortfall of funds from those violations, there is no expectation for the contract that Milton would pay those.
Yeah, that's 6.5.
That's just-
6.5, yeah.
Yeah, they're eliminated.
But my concern is, and again, I know it's not a concern of my colleagues, but the third party that I answer to is the citizenry of our city. And having knocked on the doors of I mean, statistically, I'd say it's a large number of residents who say, we don't want this. Perhaps that's the third party that's going to come to us and say, we don't like this, get rid of it. I don't see that third party as having any standing in this contract for us to be able to reverse this. And that's my concern.
Just as another council member, I appreciate all the comments on there. I do take disagreement about, I think all the council is very much in tune with what citizens want and different things. I know I've spoken to many too, but I'm more of the community of, I walk my grandkids to school and I do other things, and the people I associate with want something like this, because just today, walking up to Discovery was always an issue at the corner up there when I'm towing two kids along. So it's a little, maybe it's too personal to me on that, but it does bother me, the things that are going on our intersections and that. And I do think all our council does have the city in mind for here and that. Any other discussion? Councilmember Hall?
I also think the citizens are going to know these cameras are in place. We're going to give them notice. And it's going to be the drive-throughs that's really going to be more affected, I think, than the city citizens. But yes, I am a walker, and I'm very well aware how dangerous our roads can be. I mean, how scary they can be. I'm an adult, and I've almost been hit. So what does a child do when they're in an intersection and they're not able to make those decisions? That's where I'm coming from.
Councilmember
One
Schrader?
last comment. One of my other concerns is the lack of participation that we've gotten from citizens. I don't
Can
feel
you
that
pull
we.
that up? We're having a hard time hearing.
Oh,
Yeah, when you turn your head, the same when, I'm still having difficulty hearing, and I want to check that microphone before we're finished tonight. I think I got everything. But turning away from it, I can't hear.
okay. How's that? That better?
You probably have the same problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my concern is that I haven't seen any studies where we've done pamphlets or made the main public aware that we're even doing this. And it seems like a very, very short time that we've implemented this thing. So just my last comment.
Isn't that satisfied by the fact that 30 days prior to enforcing the code, there's going to be signage up? There's going to be notifications on the road. The public is going to be informed beyond what we say in council. In the physical circumstances to where they're going to drive, there will be notification. And if they can't read it, that's not our problem. If they don't understand it, that's not particularly our problem either. We'll put it in English. But in 30 days, on the 31st day, if you break that code, this law, this ordinance, after the signage is up, you're going to get ticketed, but not prior. So there is a notification time for the general public to become aware and educated that we're using the latest technology to protect our general public in the city of Milton. I don't find any problem with that.
Councilmember Hall?
I have a question. I was going through the packet. It said that they would notify the residents within 900 feet. Did I read that right? Which is really only a little over a block.
Which section, council member?
Oh, I read it last night. I do not know. Look at that and see what you think.
Okay.
I will look through it and see if I can find it. I know I highlighted it.
And we will have this in our newsletter if council approves it and this moves forward. It'll be in the newsletter, it'll be on our website, and then there will also be a month warning period where anyone who earns an infraction will have a warning letter sent to their house saying this intersection is now protected by photo enforcement, and this warning will stop on such and such date, 30 days after initiation.
Go ahead, if I find it, I'll let you know where it is.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, it has been moved by Councilmember Whalen and I also want to, yeah, I forgot that part. As soon as I started saying that, I thought, oh, I got to look up. Anybody from the audience that has, I saw all the hands. Susan?
Susan Johnson, 2307 8th Avenue. I find it disturbing that this council has been classified as not caring about the citizens because they all mostly care about the citizens. This is important to be done. And, you know, I get tired of people saying the people don't know. Well, we have a website now, and for years the city never had one. We have a newsletter. For years the city didn't have one. You have to take it upon yourself also to be concerned about your city. So for some council members to say there's not notification or involvement with cities, it's also citizens. It's incumbent upon citizens to get involved if they're concerned about their city. We need to stop the speeding. Yes, there's maybe some issues with the language. I'm not a lawyer. Councilmember Cedar made it very clear of what he thought as a lawyer. I believe the discourse between the two is fair in that potential, or the other word, we need to do it. I mean, yes, you think the cost. Well, what's the cost of a life? What is the friggin' cost of a life?
Jackie?
Jackie Strader, 1809 13th Avenue. So about the clause in the Puyallup, their vendor does a reduced, like, when you buy a cell phone and they say you have so many months. So they say, this is the cost of the camera. Every month you have it, it reduces by this amount. So if you want to exit, you pay like an exit fee so that as you get, more into it, it's less. So that is one way, because Fife made it clear in their agenda bill when they contracted with Novo Global. It says, the contract is not cancelable during the 5-year period unless there is a change in state law prohibiting or materially changing the program. The reason for the cancellation prohibition is that photo enforcement systems require a substantial initial cost to the vendor, which they must recoup over the 5-year term. So if that's the reason, they could have a reduced rate as they win, if they would be willing to do that. So that's one way to do it. My other concern is there's a talk about it's recouped, what the numbers are, you've run the numbers. Where are the numbers? I've been involved since the beginning. I've never seen numbers. I've never seen revenue projections. I have no idea I'm assuming based on all the surrounding cities that this is millions of dollars, but I don't know that. And I just don't know why we're voting on something that, do you have the information about what it costs for police officers, what it costs for the court, what it costs for the administrative? What is the administrative cost? What have the other cities said? Why haven't we seen how they're running their programs? I don't understand why we're doing this contract so quickly, and it's just being rammed down our throats. And I'm for cameras, but I don't understand what the rush is. And why can't we do it right? Thank you. I'm getting frustrated.
Ms. Whalen?
Jacqueline Whalen, Milton, Washington. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on what you have before you this evening regarding the contract with Novoa Global and their exhibits. You may not be surprised at the fact that I too am a grammar word girl. It bugs me when I see some of the sloppiness in the agreement. That means to me there's other sloppiness somewhere. Maybe that's a bad correlation. We don't have a city manager. How much more glaring can you get in terms of who's reading, who's proofreading? And I appreciate the comments that really go to my point. I am for cameras and enforcement. The rules you set, the parameters, that's another discussion. This is a big obligation on the city. And when I start reading in the exhibits, interest charged and all this stuff, it just looks like there's not going to be any revenue for the city. I'm not even going to assume that there will be revenue for the city. So if that's a thought in the back of minds, we're not seeing any, and we won't know. I worry about things like the contract, the service agreement says protection of rights. And I think, what about our city computer server? There's all sorts of things in the service agreement that say proprietary information. I respect that. But do we have a cost of upgrading our servers to protect Novo Global's information? I too have trouble with 5.4. That comes from history. When we had a volunteer fire department, East Pierce Fire and Rescue, chief who's no longer with them, stood there, made all kinds of assurances, verbal, and when they didn't come true, it was read your contract. So the words, the commas, the apostrophes, all that stuff matters. I have a problem with the tiers. You mean to tell me that one more infraction is going to ding us $1,000 a month when you go up a tier? The tiers are too big. I have a problem with you bringing up legitimate concerns, and there's no, hey, well, let's work on addressing that concern. I have a problem with being told school zone 2999 or whatever, and at the prior meeting, oh, the cameras should be on when football games come out. We have things going on more than just the short term when the lights are on. So which is it? Is the school zone camera on all the time at 4,000, or is it on for 75% of the time at 3,000? I have a problem with the automatic renewal. Why can't we get that same clause that says it's not automatic? How many of you have had subscriptions that go, oh gosh, we needed to cancel that and we didn't? So my problem is more with the contract, and there isn't enough assurances for the city where we can get out of this if this just isn't working out. Thank you.
Anyone else? It has been moved by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Cedar. Oh, sorry, I got to get back to the motion here. To move to authorize the mayor to execute the services agreement with Novo Global Incorporated for traffic infraction detection and enforcement. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, we're going to do a,
Mayor Pro Tem, can we do a roll call vote, please?
pardon me, roll call?
Can we do a roll call?
Yeah, we'll do a roll call on this vote. Councilmember Whalen?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall?
Aye.
Councilmember Strader?
Nay.
Councilmember Cedar?
Aye.
Councilmember Peretti, aye. Councilmember White?
No.
Councilmember Whitaker?
Aye.
Pass 5-2. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda, council reports. Councilmember Whitaker?
Thank you.
I'm
All I
sorry.
have is.
Excuse me.
I believe we have one other item on the agenda
Oh, is
prior
there?
to council reports.
Is there?
We do, yes.
Oh,
So
nice.
tonight also presenting
Oh, yeah.
will be Transpo on the traffic calming program. They're going to present an update on where we are with that contract and with the program in general. The goal of tonight's presentation is to present traffic data that was compiled throughout the city, talk about potential solutions to some of those issues, and receive any feedback that council may have to direct us on a final program packet. And presenting tonight will be John Principal of Transpo.
Sorry about that, John. I got my papers mixed up here, but
It's all right.
thank you
No,
for being.
we'll keep going on the speed management discussion here. John Pascal with the Transpo Group. And just so you know, background-wise, we are the city's on-call transportation planner, engineering firm. So we're here to represent the city on, anytime you need transportation advice or expertise. And one of the task orders under our on-call agreement is to help prepare this traffic calming program. And so I met with you all back at the retreat back in the winter time. And here tonight to give you an update on the program. The program is not complete. This is more kind of a midway update to get some input from you. And then we'll be bringing it back for a full kind of draft program for implementation. So that's what's going on today. I had the slide deck in there, and I'm happy to kind of run through those really quick, or if that would be good. Okay. So on the second slide is the agenda, and a couple things that we're going to be looking at is the speed data. And the reason why I want to present that is because that's going to identify the types of solutions that might address the speed data. But to identify those solutions, I want to walk you through a program structure, because ultimately you want a program to define how and when and where you may or may not implement traffic calming devices or measures over time. You want something that's a sustainable program to follow, that citizens understand how they can be a part of that. So I'll give you an update on all of that. I'm going to be fumbling through my slides here. Sorry. Just for a reminder, the major tasks that we are undertaken is to collect speed data on some key corridors, to develop some traffic calming implementation policies, to prepare an ultimate handbook. So what we'll prepare at the end is a handbook that you can upload to the website. People can flip through, download, understand all the different devices, the thresholds that you would need to implement those devices, general costs, and then the whole public process of how the city goes about prioritizing and funding these over time. So, and it will include a toolbox of all the different types of devices out there. So getting into the speed data, we collected data along corridors that I think most of us in this room are aware of, that there's ongoing problems in some way from a speeding issue. And it was 8 locations. We collected that information in September. So we didn't get that information back until the beginning of October. And so that's when we kind of ramped up the traffic calming program. We haven't been working on it since the retreat. We started in October once we got the data and started developing everything. That information collected average daily traffic volumes. It collected all the types of speed information that you would want to, one, understand whether there's a problem, and then the magnitude that problem is there. And that's 50th percentile, 85th percentile speeds, paces, and other things that us traffic engineers look at as one type of information to understand whether or not we should be considering something different. The slide, there's a slide that's called Speed Criteria to Consider, and I presented this last time, but it's basically a bell curve of what you often see. And if you actually compare that to some of the speed results for some of the corridors, you'll notice that some of them are natural bell curves. There's some people that go below the speed limit, there's some people that go above, and then there's some people that go way above. And that is something that we often find. It's the degree of how many speeders there are above the speed limit is what we look for. And that's usually the 85th percentile is one of those factors that we look at. 15% of the speeders are going to, people speeding, those folks are going to be it's going to be really hard to change their behavior without enforcement. And so that's why usually speed limits are set within 10 miles an hour of the 85th percentile. So for a 25-mile-an-hour facility, posted speed, we like to see 85th percentile below 35. Obviously, it would be nice to see it lower, but that's generally a threshold that we use because there are a lot of speeding issues across the region. The first corridor that we looked at was Emerald Street. We set up a couple tubes across there. one of them kept on getting removed, so we had to move it. And we collected a location between 21st and 22nd, and then between 12th and 13th. And generally what we found was that it's posted 25 miles an hour, and the 85th percentile was 31 to 33 miles an hour. So 6 to 8 miles over the posted speed. Approximately a quarter of the vehicles were traveling 5 miles and over the speed limit, so over 30 miles an hour, about a quarter of the vehicles. Moving on to Milton Way, that two locations were collected, one west of 15th, and then the other was east of 7th, no, I'm sorry. Between 23rd and 26th. You know, it's a higher speed facility with a posted speed of 35, so the 85th percentile was right around that speed limit. Very few vehicles traveling 5 miles and over the speed limit, so more than 40, a very low percentage. So, you know, at the kind of to the east, but then to the west, you saw a little bit higher amounts of vehicles speeding. I know I'm quickly going through these, but you can stop me if you want. Taylor Street was when we really started to see quite a number of vehicles traveling at 5 miles and over the speed limit. So at 30 plus, more than half the vehicles along the corridor going over 30 miles an hour. Yes.
What time of the day was that you saw that?
These are summarized, this information summarized like for across several days for all hours.
You don't have a time stamp, like you don't have,
We do.
like in the morning or in the afternoon?
I don't know that offhand.
Okay.
But yeah, that's information that we do have. We usually do take a look at that, and if we see any kind of odd anomalies, we'll definitely pull that kind of out of the data, because that does point to some things, types of solutions that you want to consider perhaps if you see some anomalies like that. The other location then, the 7th, was along Yuma Street or 20th Street on the Edgewood-Milton border. That also had a high amount of vehicles traveling over the speed limit in the westbound direction, so going downhill. And about half as much going uphill. So I think that makes sense. The 85th percentile was 33 to 37, so it's pretty much you know, at that threshold where, you know, you want to be thinking about doing something there. And then the last location was 28th Avenue.
Okay.
Yes.
So, for instance, on Taylor Street, does that kind of, I mean, it does to me, it screams out to me that they're using Taylor as a cut through. I want to avoid Milton Way. I still can drive the same speed, and there aren't any lights on there, and I can drive it. And so what do you do in those cases to curb that behavior?
And I'm gonna cover that at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, after I go through
Thank
the
you, and
toolbox.
thank you.
Yeah, I will definitely cover that, because that's one of the things that we were charged to address. I think I was looking through, you know, the other information I don't have, but we do, is kind of the number of daily vehicles that travel along each corridor, so you can kind of see the comparison between Taylor and Milton Way and so forth, but I don't have that readily available.
Because it's, you know, I mean, I'm seeing the same thing with 28th. The same thing screams out to me with 28th.
Yeah.
They're using it to avoid Meridian.
Yeah. 28th by far had the most number of vehicles traveling over the posted speed. That had the 85th percentile at 40 to 42 miles an hour. There's a 25 mile an hour posted speed limit. So that, I've been doing this for a lot of years. I don't know, there's very few times I've seen it that prevalent. That definitely has stuck out to me as a traffic engineer, 28th Avenue. So I have a table that summarizes all 8 locations. And so we flagged the locations 5, 6, and 7, which are Taylor, Yuma, and 28th Avenue. They stood out above the other corridors, Milton Way and Emerald. It's not to say that there aren't concerns along those other corridors. It's just that these 4 were ones that we then took a little closer look at in terms of the types of traffic calming measures the city could consider to address some of and lower some of the speeding. So then I'm going to go into the program structure. This would be slide 18 or page 112 of your packet. And so I kind of hinted at this, but why create a formal program? It allows the public to understand the process. If they have a speeding complaint and they want the city to perhaps address the issue, how does that work? Who's responsible? Where does that complaint go? And then how is it balanced against other complaints or other needs across the city? It can help determine thresholds for implementation. So, the degree of speeding, we can set thresholds and say, we're really going to just focus on, the top, 20%, or, speeds at where the 85th percentile is 10 miles an hour over the posted speed or greater, just to try to really focus on the most critical locations. So we can kind of set those thresholds in the program as kind of guidelines. We can identify the types of solutions that the city would consider or not consider. Some cities are very particular about the types of solutions. In Milton, I would suspect that you would want solutions that are lower cost, easier to maintain just because of lesser resources than a city like Tacoma that has more resources. And then just how you'd go about prioritizing implementation of any devices, recognizing that the needs might be great or the wants might be great, but you can only do so much because of your resource constraints. So that's what the program would attempt to provide some structure around. It would have 2 phases that the residents would where any location would have to go through. The first would be phase 1, where you get a complaint or request and you do some initial study. If it's not an area of where the 85th percentile speeds are over 10 miles an hour over the posted speed, you might consider some targeted enforcement, some education, the radar speed trailer, for example, other kind of low-cost solutions like narrowing up the vehicle, the lanes, or doing some really kind of easier things that city crews could do. You'd monitor that. If there's still a problem, then you'd come back and move on to phase 2. Phase 2 are for those locations, like I said, like Taylor Street, like Yuma, like 28th, where education and some targeted enforcement are not fundamentally going to change the behavior according to the data. So that's where you're going to need probably some physical traffic calming devices. If you really want to lower those speeds, you're going to have to do something with the roadway in some locations. And so then phase 2 really gets into, okay, what's that type of device? How would it be funded? How much would it cost? What location would it go in? And so forth. The next slide is the program process, and I'm going to walk you through this. It's a flow chart, and this would be on your website. And this looks very similar to some other cities. Like if you go out to Federal Way, or I think even Puyallup, they'll have like a similar flow chart, but basically there's a request for service. The city takes that in, probably via email or the website. Then you decide on whether or not you do a traffic study there, or maybe a traffic study was recently done, or maybe it's 10th in line and you're only doing one every year or something. But then a traffic study would be done, and then we'd look at the results And again, if it was below those thresholds, you'd move on to phase 1 actions, implement those, monitor. If they exceeded those thresholds where there was a much, over 10 miles an hour, the 85th percentile is 10 miles an hour over the posted speed, you'd move down. And then you look at the type of facility. If it's a collector road or a local road, you would maybe identify phase 2 actions, and I have that circled in red. If it's an arterial road, like a minor arterial or principal arterial, that's going to be more difficult because those are emergency access routes, those are bus routes, those are designed for higher speeds and so forth. So putting a physical traffic calming device in there might not be possible. So that's why we go back and we think about that. But a collector road like Taylor, for example, that's where we are, right where it's circled in red, or identify phase 2 actions. So I want to kind of walk you through what some of those actions could be after I go through the program. Does that make, hopefully that makes sense. Some of the key policy questions are, how many traffic studies are you doing each year? They cost money, or they take staff time, or they take hardware that the city has to invest in and keep up with. How would the traffic calming devices be prioritized? And then what type of public outreach do you want to do before you actually implemented a device along a roadway? So the next slide is the prioritization criteria. We'll look at things like safety, roadway characteristics, community context. Safety is going to look at the magnitude of the speeding issue, but we're also going to consider crash history. We're going to consider the roadway classification, how many vehicles are traveling. We could look at things like time of day, whether it's at night or in the morning. Roadway characteristics, are there a presence of active transportation facilities or are there none? Are there crossings? Are there sight distance issues? Are there vertical challenges, or grades, sharp curves? Is it near a school? Is it near a park? And so forth. So those are pretty typical prioritization criteria that we would incorporate into the program. And then I want to just hit on the public outreach options. And I want to frame this for you. So you can think of traffic calming and speed management, and this is the way I think of them, is that it's a safety, what we're trying to do is trying to address a safety issue. Ultimately, that's the foundational aspect. And the council can set policy for staff and say, here's the program. This is the policy that we want you now to implement to address these safety concerns. And you go do it based upon the budget and how much money is going into the traffic calming program. And staff goes and implements it based upon that program. That's the simplest. And then they let the public know through the website, through meetings, through just your regular communication channels, and that's it. The second option would be to do that, but then if a traffic calming device is being installed, you could notify the neighbors within 1,000 feet or some distance away from that traffic calming device and say, let them know about it and gather feedback. Some cities do that, and that's kind of an automatic thing, but that takes additional costs and resources. And then what do you do with that information would be something we'd want to think about. And then the third is that you send out those mailers and then you only install the device if a majority supports it. Or you could set it at a different threshold. You could set it as supermajority. Some cities have it at 75%. They basically have no traffic calming program. So you have to think carefully of how you'd want to shape this. We would start with 1, unless, and maybe 2 as a recommendation, but if you want to go to 3 where it's resource intensive, then that would be something that would be direction that we'd want to hear today. I'm not going to walk through all the examples. I think those are there for you all to look through. I think it'd take a little bit too much time. I can answer any questions about those. Happy to do that. I guess I'd want to leave you on getting back to Councilmember Whitaker's, did I get your question? It's on slide 35, page 129 of 132. And this is titled Types of Measures to Consider on the Study Corridors. So for Taylor Street, it's a collector arterial. It's posted at 25. It does partly share a border with Edgewood, so you definitely want to get Edgewood's thoughts on things. But we're seeing that the types of devices that would probably have a better chance of addressing some of the issues would be speed humps in select locations, maybe a mini roundabout at the key collector intersections like 15th and Taylor, 23rd and Taylor, for example, and maybe some bulb outs if there's any crosswalks. We're not designing this, we're not recommending that, but those would be maybe something to start thinking about. And then if that's of interest, we can go a little bit further and do a little bit more investigation of where that might make sense, where we think that would be most effective. But it'd be some combination. It's not usually just going to be one thing. It's going to be a kind of a corridor strategy along Taylor. Along 28th, with the interurban trail extension being planned and moving into design stage, that's a really great opportunity for a raised crosswalk, and that's like a speed hump, right? Except it elevates the pedestrians, gives them better visibility to vehicles, but slows down vehicles. And then that could be matched with other combination of other signage and other things to really try to get those speeds down. And then long-term improvement, maybe trying to work to adjust that intersection with 161, where it's just not so easy to take a right turn at high speed. And then Yuma, that's a minor arterial, and I want to do some more thinking about that one. I've seen that there's a lot of development on the Edgewood side. It's widening the road. It's creating, in some ways, some good pedestrian and some bike facilities, perhaps, in short segments, but it's also widening the road out. And so the more you widen roadways, the more it can induce speeding. So that's one I don't have a particular recommendation yet. That's one that I'd want to think about more, especially as part of the transportation element update, because maybe Yuma Street shouldn't be a minor arterial. Maybe it should be a collector roadway. And those are the types of policy changes we can make as part of the transportation element update. So that's kind of, those are my thoughts so far. A lot more work to do. We'll come back with kind of policy recommendations. We'll come back with, we're auditing your street design standards to basically through a vehicle speed lens. So we're going to be recommending changes perhaps to your standards to narrow things up or make things a little bit smaller so that you can, when new road construction or new development is occurring, that we're thinking about that in the context of reducing speeds. We'll prepare the traffic calming program handbook, and then we'll finalize any recommendations for the study corridors, Taylor Street, Yuma, and 28. Questions? I know that was a lot. Apologize.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just one update you may or may not be aware of. Yuma has been reduced to 25 miles an hour all the way from Melton Way to Meridian. That road has changed significantly. It's still a speeding road. The reduction in the speed limit has helped a little bit, but there's a lot of building that's going on. I mean, there isn't the width of the road anymore that we may have considered in the past.
Right.
I've seen a very similar presentation in the past, and you've mentioned the same roads that we talked about maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, they haven't changed much. Your presentation is pretty spot on with what it was. The roads that you mentioned, the minor arterials, the smaller arterials, Taylor Street and so forth, what we have to do is, and it's a good presentation, but we've got to spend some money on this, because otherwise we'll be another 8 years talking about the same flyers and so forth. We have to devote quite a bit, significant amount of money to manage our traffic issues. Too many places, and you see in your numbers that most of the traffic, it's above the speed limit. I'm not gonna go through all the pages and stuff. We have more problems now because the city is built out more. And we're more of a cross-through traffic place right now than we ever used to be. But thank you for the presentation. I just want to start there.
Councilman Streeter?
What method do you use to collect your data for the speeds and stuff? Is it radar or is it road sensor?
It's the road sensors, the tube counts that you lay across the road. And we do it, we make sure we set those up in locations where they're capturing the data appropriately. If you get them too close to stop signs or signals, then, you know, you're gonna have cars rolling across, right? So we always look at the optimal place to put them.
So did you move, when you took your data, did you move around to different locations on the same street, like say on Taylor? Did you move different locations or did you just take your sample from one location?
A couple locations on each corridor, and those are set out, all of the tubes were set out during the same time frame, so we kind of captured all of the corridors at the same time.
Okay. And can you also tell what the weight of those vehicles are, so we have an idea what kind of commercial trucks we got coming through there and the damage they may be or may not be doing?
I can't remember if I have that information. We can collect that. I just can't remember if it was part of the collection.
Okay. And when you collected that data, when was that?
I was in September.
September.
Mid-September.
Okay, yeah.
So we really wanted to make sure we got the start of school, good weather. People are still traveling a lot. September is a good month for this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Cedar?
Just to give us a little breathing room, I'd like to we extend the end of council meeting to 9:20 tonight.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Anything else?
We should probably vote on that motion.
Yeah. All in favor of extending the meeting till 9:20?
Aye.
Aye.
That's what
Okay.
we normally do.
Yeah.
You know, it's scheduled from 7 to 9.
Okay. So you said 9:20?
9:20, aye.
9:20,
Yeah.
okay.
9.
And then I have a couple questions, if I may.
He said until 9:20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't always hear everybody.
That's all right. Any other questions?
Oh, I have some questions as well.
All right.
Thanks. I have some policy points I'd love to share with you, but first I just have a couple methodology questions. Have you, in your experience, ever seen a distinction between speed data that's collected via the tubes versus speed data that's collected via radar or some sort of concealed method?
Yeah. I don't know that I've compared them, but when we get them both by radar or by tubes, oftentimes, and I don't see a noticeable difference usually. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. That's good to know so that we know our data is reliable here, right? The tube. So before I kind of weigh in on policy, I'm going to just make a note here, which is that for me, when I see any data, even if it's 85th percentile is within 5 miles per hour of the speed limit, that still means there's 25, 30 cars a day that are going 40, 45 on our streets. And that to me is unacceptable because all it takes is one to kill a kid, right? So I am big in favor of phase 2 improvements, which would be more what I view as more environmental hard structure changes. I think phase 1 improvements are nice, but it still relies on driver attentiveness and responsibility. So I think that we could have, when we do public outreach in that regard, I think we could have a tiered approach where for phase 1, we use just kind of this option 1. We say to, in our general newsletter, hey, council's considering it. Hey, it's on our agenda. And phase 1 implementation should be low stakes, low buy-in. For phase 2 or something where we're going to change the structure, I think we should have that. I like that option of notifying people within 1,000 feet and allowing input on that. What I'd also be interested from Transpo Group is if there's any almost a middle ground where, like, let's say, for instance, we're thinking about installing a bump out. Well, we can go out with a few $100s, maybe thousands of dollars worth of material and create a temporary bump out and allow that to be a pilot project for 3 weeks and meanwhile put a sandwich sign there with a QR code. Say, hey, opinion about this project? Scan this code, give it to us, and take that immediate feedback, and then disassemble the project, after that set time period, and take that feedback. Because I think one of the problems of these approaches where we ask the public is a problem that we have with a lot of times, which is, hey, do you want to have a speed bump on your road? Well, no, but I want people to go slower, right? And so sometimes just putting the project in a pilot project can really show people that it works without drastically interfering with their life. I would like to see that ability in our program. Is that feasible, or is that something that?
Something that we definitely can think about, yeah.
Okay. I also would just note that I like the prioritization method. I think from a general policy perspective, it feels to me like Milton has a policy of getting the traffic toward Milton Way, so that Milton Way is where cars are encouraged to drive if they want to move through the city, rather than using Taylor or to some extent Yuma. And when I look at the data we have here, it looks like average daily traffic, which is the y-axis on all of your graphs, supports that. I mean, we have thousands of cars moving on Milton Way and less than 1,000 moving on Taylor on these graphs. So it seems to be that's almost automatic here.
Yeah.
But I think the data we would want to support that is to be able to show that moving on Taylor will move you slower than moving on Milton Way. If we can set up a system where that is objectively true, then I think we will have succeeded. And that could be one of our measures, or one kind of policy trend we should be working towards, again, in my opinion. Does that kind of make sense how I set that up? So that we're discouraging traffic from thinking they can use these alternate routes. And I guess to the same extent, you have it marked on your map here, people using this road that goes right by City Hall and then up Hemlock Street as a way to get around the Porter Way, Milton Way
Yeah.
exchange. We should be discouraging that, right? So I think whatever our policies are that can discourage those, maybe it's a hard stop, right, on Taylor Way and 15th, a hard cut. You can't go straight there. You have to turn onto Milton Way, or something similar, or not allowing people to go down Juniper, or Juniper onto Milton Way. I'd be interested in those things. What can we do to stop that? Not just suggesting it, but stopping it.
I'm also hearing you talk about, when you talk about making sure that these things are being addressed, is some type of monitoring program where we collect this information in the same location, kind of same time frame, every other year or whatever that is, so that you can compare back to see how things are changing or not.
Yeah,
And a lot of programs are set up that way to do that. Yeah.
and that's fantastic. And I think that that's necessary for us because, we are small, we have a limited staff. We want to do what's right, but we can't design perfection. And so to have the ability to unwind it if the data doesn't support it, recognizing that might be a cost, but I think that that's really important. We don't want to just live with our mistakes for the rest of our lives. I have a lot more to say, but I will not tonight. I will leave it. Thank you for all of your work on this.
Councilmember Whitaker?
Thank you. It seems that a lot of this too is understanding human behavior too, correct? Because the people are driving. So then I guess that's to the chief too. So then you have to use that kind of what's normal human behavior to try to manipulate it to get them to do what you want to do. When you said, the council member Cedar, when you said the part about getting people to drive on Milton Way rather than on Emerald or on Yuma, it harkened to, you've been on the freeway and it'll tell you how long it's going to take you to get to Seattle. So it's kind of like, if you were on Milton Way, it'd be kind of funny to see. If you were on Taylor, it's going to take you this long. On Milton Way, it's going to take you this long. Well, of course, then you're going to pick the fastest way. Of course, unfortunately, that would cost a lot of money. But that definitely would cut to the heart of it too. That would give people, that would definitely direct them. But yeah, the human behavior is always the interesting aspect to dealing with that.
Anyone else?
I just had one thing to give credit to John. I've had a couple of discussions with him, and just so you understand a little bit of his background, he is a active, or has been an active city council legislator. He also sits on the Traffic Safety Commission and has been involved in the efforts at a state level as far as providing input and guidance. And so I've really appreciated his counsel regarding some of the things that we're trying to deal with in the city. So just to give him a prop of very credible, very good resource for the city of Milton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Whalen?
Just a curious question. An example in town is 23rd and Emerald. Emerald's coming up the hill, 23rd intersects. There's some building going on in that particular area. Can that intersection have a speed bump? And I don't mean just a hump or so forth. Is that something that's applied in areas like that, or they're not heavily trafficked, they're just sped through quite a bit?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about it,
You're talking about at the intersection?
at the intersection, single lane, the intersecting lane, not the exiting lane from it. Is that a concept that's utilized at all?
Usually speed humps or speed bumps are away from the intersection, and then what is used at the intersection is what we call a raised intersection, where you kind of go up and then you go through the intersection and go back down.
Yeah, it's like an advisory that this is a stop. And it's more than just a stop sign. It's a physical reminder that you're going to have to stop here. There's no through traffic.
Well, and that's why the mini roundabouts are something that we've been applying in other areas, because they're low cost. You can do them with paint, you can do them temporary, and they really slow down vehicles.
Unfortunately, that area doesn't give us enough land mass to do anything other than a lane inhibitor. So something to remind you. I like the little roundabouts at corners and so forth.
Yeah.
I've seen it successfully used in a lot of different places. But
I'll
unfortunately.
look at that. I'll look at that location. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, that particular corner is complained about quite a bit, and maybe others know more about it than I do. But it is, people on 23rd basically don't stop. Well, some don't stop. Some do. Coming up from Emerald, occasionally people don't stop. Emerald has another intersection right here on 11th that is juxtaposed. That one could have a nice little roundabout to do it, but it's not going to make people stop. And that's the big thing on our streets and so forth. There's too many little intersections that people must stop at, which they don't. Anyway, that's just a little question.
Councilman Strader?
I didn't see in any of your pictures showing, have you ever had any experience with speed dips, using speed dips versus a hump?
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I can think of one offhand.
Well, come up on 13th, you can look at all the speed dips we have.
In the potholes?
Oh, some call them potholes.
Yeah, I got you.
Those are man-made. Anyone else?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Oh,
The other is that in a lot of our roads, we don't have what they used to call the fog line. White lines on the right side and so forth. And that has a tendency to narrow people down a little bit in their mindset and so forth. Like Taylor. Taylor has some, they don't have a whole lot. It depends upon where you are. And a lot of our small streets don't have. I think 15th Avenue between Taylor and Oak, I think there's fog lines, as they call them. But there's not in a whole lot of places. Are they beneficial? They're reasonably inexpensive. I'm not talking about the granular, the graded type, which is a nice feature also. But I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd just say that that's part of the toolbox, those type of options, the fog line or the edge striping, and doing it in different ways too, not just a standard one. But there's also other things going on out there that I can put in the toolbox to kind of share with you. And I'm not going to try to explain them right now, but I'll bring some photos and include those. But that other agencies are doing, like Port Townsend is doing some really cool stuff with lane striping, and they have a lot of similar kind of roadways in their neighborhoods like Milton does. And they're seeing some good results from it.
I'm looking at something like the fog lines, if they're of a benefit, is something that we could incorporate within our own city government to do. It's not that expensive to equip for it.
No, but just to maintain them over time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our last item here with council reports. Councilmember Whitaker.
Okay, one more time.
Yep.
I appreciate the presentations tonight and the discussions on the different issues that come before us. It's kind of cool to, have those things that you really have to think about. That's what makes council so much fun. I also appreciate the citizens' input. I think it's very important. I wish more people would do that. Because if we really want to do what the citizens want us to do, we need to get the input from those citizens. And now to a lighter note, so because Thanksgiving's coming up, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And especially happy Black Friday to everybody too, because you'll enjoy that as well. And we'll see you all at the beginning of the holiday season.
Councilmember White?
I don't have much. I thank you for the heated but cordial debate. I appreciate the great working relationship we have on this council. Thank you for putting up with someone with a frequent different point of view. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Councilmember Cedar?
Thanks. I appreciate everybody here as well. So I really enjoy working with everyone. I wanted to just note that I expect to engage the city, just kind of for everybody's SA, about some kind of ordinance to redirect any revenue collected from red light cameras or automated enforcement into a traffic calming program to hopefully fund some of these ideas that we have that we're generating.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to having discussions about that in the future, how we can make that work for the city. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Great discussion tonight.
Happy Thanksgiving, and please remember while we are enjoying our holiday that our police department is staffed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Well, I can't add much more to that. Thanksgiving's coming, holidays are coming, weather has been nice for the last day or so. You just enjoy yourselves online. It was a good meeting.
Thank you all for bearing with me on leading this process for the last few weeks for our mayor and that. So I appreciate the point of orders I get sometimes because I maybe screw up and miss those things out, but I know our mayor will be returning here shortly. Again, have a great Thanksgiving time, and I really do appreciate discussion and even opposition discussions that we have. I think it's very, very good for the city in that. Police chief, let's see, we'll start with, do you have anything for us out there? No? No? Director Madden?
Nothing for me.
Police chief?
Unfortunately, I'm always the guy of bearer of bad news. Just if you were not aware, we did have an injury collision accident on the Pack Highway where an 81-year-old male succumbed to his injuries and died shortly after the collision. Unfortunately, he was the causing driver, turning out of the wheelchair place down there on the Pack Highway and didn't see, for whatever reason, the oncoming traffic coming southbound, and he was turning northbound, and side impact T-bone collision, 60 miles an hour, and so he succumbed to his injuries. So we're still, we've got traffic data that we're looking at, still investigating the fatality collision. The other thing is we continue to deal with the brazen criminal activity. Just as an example today, I will give you during day shift, we had one of the construction workers who was working on Fifth, who had their Hyundai parked alongside the road. They interrupted some people that were trying to steal their car, and they did, and they took off, and we weren't able to catch them, but they did yell back that they would come back and steal the car no matter what. So just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with on a regular basis. The good news is our guys are out doing a lot of traffic stops. But we're seeing people constantly run from us during the day, during the night, when we're trying to do these traffic stops. So again, it continues to get worse. So when you get a chance to go down to Olympia, when you see potential legislation, I think that the pendulum is starting to swing in Washington because people are getting tired and fed up. And so they are really pressuring their legislators to make new laws to be able to enable the police to be able to do their jobs. And on a happy note, I will end with Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Chief. Seeing all agenda items have been concluded, I adjourn this meeting at 9:06.